"You do not belong at this table," Victoria Langford said, her voice sharp and confident as she swept into the lavish restaurant, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor, immediately drawing the eyes of every patron in the room. Marcus Reed, the black executive, had already been seated at the corner window table he had reserved weeks in advance, and he looked up calmly, adjusting the cuff of his tailored suit. His expression measured and unreadable, as if the situation was beneath him to react, while Victoria, accustomed to getting her way, leaned slightly on the table, claiming it with an air of entitlement, and the manager, flustered and eager to avoid confrontation, immediately sided with her, nodding and gesturing to Marcus to perhaps find another table. Unaware that this was no ordinary guest, Marcus's gaze remained steady, a quiet confidence radiating from him, and though Victoria smiled, thinking she had won, her friends at the nearby table whispered their amusement, unaware that Marcus's composure was not a sign of weakness but of strategic patience. The subtle clink of crystal glasses and the low hum of conversation filling the room as Marcus quietly gathered his coat, preparing to leave the table, his movements smooth and controlled, while Victoria's expression was one of triumph, her laughter lightly echoing through the high-ceilinged room. Yet there was a flicker of curiosity in a few onlookers' eyes, noticing the calm dignity with which Marcus departed, his posture straight and his stride purposeful, as he walked past the rows of tables, passing by decorative plants and carefully arranged silverware. Not a word spoken, only the soft shuffle of his shoes against the polished floor. And in that moment Victoria could not predict what was coming, the door to the private mezzanine slightly ajar, light spilling onto the ground, where a phone call awaited Marcus, summoning him upstairs for a matter of ownership and control that was about to shift the dynamics of the entire establishment, a twist unknown to the socialite who believed she had asserted dominance, leaving her momentarily frozen in the realization that appearances could be deceiving and that the man she thought was a simple executive held a power far beyond her assumptions. As Marcus paused at the top of the stairs, looking back for a brief second with a composed smile, a silent promise that patience and calm intelligence were his allies, setting the stage for a revelation that would challenge the room's hierarchy and leave every observer questioning their assumptions about status, entitlement, and true ownership, all unfolding under the warm glow of chandeliers and the soft evening light filtering through the tall windows, casting long dramatic shadows across the marble floor and polished wood, creating an atmosphere charged with anticipation, tension, and the subtle undercurrent of impending change, ensuring that every guest, every staff member, and especially Victoria would soon understand that the game of power had only just begun, and Marcus Reed was already several moves ahead. His quiet exit a prelude to the dramatic reversal that was about to redefine the meaning of respect and authority within these walls. Marcus Reed stepped into the private office on the mezzanine, the rich wood panels and shelves lined with financial awards giving the room an air of understated authority. He placed his briefcase on the desk, opened it with calm precision, and began reviewing documents while his assistant, a sharp and attentive woman in her mid-30s, handed over reports, all the while maintaining professional composure, the soft click of pens and the subtle shuffle of papers the only sounds in the room. The sunlight streaming through tall windows illuminating Marcus's thoughtful expression as he considered the next strategic moves for his company, noting every detail from pending contracts to client portfolios, aware that each decision carried weight and the potential to reshape perceptions. Meanwhile, Victoria Langford, oblivious to the power Marcus wielded, returned to her table in the dining room, ordering an extravagant meal with friends, her laughter light and dismissive, assuming the encounter at the corner table had no consequences. Yet her phone buzzed with a notification from the building manager indicating that Marcus had been elevated to ownership status, the irony entirely lost on her in the moment. Back in the office, Marcus leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes scanning the documents with a mixture of focus and quiet amusement, aware that the moment of revelation would come at the perfect time, his assistant noting his subtle smile and the air of control that emanated from him. The contrast between his composed environment and the socialite's obliviousness highlighting the unfolding drama, the ambient light catching on crystal awards and polished surfaces, emphasizing the prestige and calm power that Marcus embodied, every item meticulously placed, a reflection of strategic planning and readiness for confrontation without conflict, while Victoria continued her lunch, unaware of the shift in ownership and authority, discussing fashion and investments with her companions. the background filled with soft piano music and clinking cutlery, all setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation that would challenge assumptions and social hierarchies. Marcus's calculated patience ensuring that when he finally stepped back into the public area, the atmosphere would change instantly, with staff and guests alike noticing the shift, the subtle tension building as those with knowledge prepared for the moment to unveil, illustrating that power and presence are often hidden, waiting for the precise moment to command attention and respect, a lesson that Victoria, despite her confidence and charm, was about to learn as Marcus reviewed the final details, adjusting his tie, ensuring everything was ready for a revelation that would transform the dynamics of the room and the perception of authority and entitlement in ways no one had anticipated, the day unfolding with poised anticipation and the soft elegance of high-stakes control. The dining room glowed beneath the warm amber light of crystal chandeliers suspended above rows of elegantly dressed guests, and Victoria Langford sat comfortably at the coveted corner table beside the floor-to-ceiling windows, enjoying the view of the city skyline while a server carefully poured sparkling water into her glass. She leaned back in her chair with the relaxed confidence of someone accustomed to receiving special treatment, occasionally glancing around the room to ensure others noticed her presence, while her friends laughed at stories about exclusive social events and luxury vacations. Yet only a few feet away, a young waitress named Emily could not stop thinking about the man who had quietly surrendered the table earlier without raising his voice or showing the slightest frustration, because something about Marcus Reed felt different from the wealthy guests she served every evening, his calm demeanor lingering in her thoughts as she moved between tables carrying silver trays and fresh plates, the soft music from a nearby piano blending with the gentle murmur of conversations throughout the restaurant, creating an atmosphere of sophistication that concealed the growing tension behind the scenes. Upstairs in the private office, Marcus continued reviewing documents while executives arrived one by one through a separate entrance, each carrying folders and financial reports, their expressions serious and focused as they prepared for an important meeting scheduled later that evening. And every person who entered greeted Marcus with genuine respect, shaking his hand and discussing operational plans for the restaurant group, while downstairs Victoria remained completely unaware that events were unfolding above her head that would soon alter the balance of power inside the building. Meanwhile, the restaurant manager who had sided with Victoria earlier found himself receiving unexpected phone calls from corporate representatives requesting updated staffing reports and customer service records, causing a faint layer of sweat to form along his forehead despite the cool air conditioning circulating through the dining room, because the frequency of executive arrivals was unusual and rumors had already begun spreading among senior employees, whispers moving quietly through service corridors and kitchen entrances as staff exchanged curious glances. Emily noticed black luxury SUVs arriving outside the restaurant entrance one after another, their passengers dressed in tailored business attire rather than evening wear, and each individual seemed to know exactly where they were going as they bypassed the dining room entirely and disappeared toward the private elevators, prompting speculation among servers and hosts about what important event might be taking place upstairs, while Victoria continued enjoying her meal, occasionally commenting on the restaurant's prestige and exclusive clientele, never realizing that the establishment itself was on the verge of entering a new chapter. The golden light from the setting sun filtered through the towering windows, casting long reflections across polished marble floors and crystal glassware, creating an almost cinematic contrast between appearance and reality, because while Victoria believed the evening had confirmed her influence, Marcus remained several steps ahead, calmly preparing for responsibilities far greater than securing a table reservation. And as another executive arrived upstairs carrying a thick portfolio marked confidential, Marcus closed one folder and opened another, his expression thoughtful and composed, aware that timing mattered more than announcements, while below him the dining room continued operating as though nothing unusual was happening at all, guests enjoying desserts, servers delivering wine, and conversations drifting lazily through the elegant space. Yet beneath the polished surface of the evening, anticipation quietly gathered strength, invisible to most people in the room but steadily moving toward a moment that would force everyone present to reevaluate what they thought they understood about status, privilege, and true authority. Emily moved quietly through the dining room carrying a silver tray balanced carefully on one hand, but her attention kept drifting toward the private elevator at the far end of the restaurant where another group of executives had just disappeared upstairs. Something unusual was happening, and every experienced employee in the building could feel it, even if nobody fully understood it yet. while the restaurant continued presenting its usual image of effortless luxury, polished crystal, reflecting warm chandelier light, expensive watches catching flashes of gold, and conversations flowing smoothly between guests seated beneath towering windows overlooking the city skyline. Victoria Langford remained at the coveted corner table, occasionally glancing around the room with satisfaction, enjoying the attention that naturally followed her presence, her friends complimenting the view and the exclusivity of the location, reinforcing her belief that she belonged among the most influential people in the city, while only a few feet away the manager repeatedly checked his phone, his growing anxiety becoming harder to conceal each time another message arrived from corporate leadership. The kitchen staff had noticed it too, whispers traveling from station to station as rumors multiplied, some claiming a major acquisition had been finalized, others insisting a new ownership group was arriving that evening, but nobody seemed to possess complete information, creating an atmosphere of anticipation that hung invisibly over the restaurant like a gathering storm. Upstairs, Marcus Reed stood beside a long conference table surrounded by financial reports, acquisition documents, and operating forecasts, listening as attorneys and senior executives finalized details that had taken months to negotiate. His expression calm and focused, the same composed demeanor he had displayed when surrendering the table earlier without protest, and as discussions continued, several executives sought his opinion before making decisions, a subtle but unmistakable sign of the authority he carried within the room, while large windows behind him revealed the sun descending slowly toward the horizon, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. Back downstairs, Emily delivered dessert menus to Victoria's table and noticed the socialite speaking confidently about influence, connections, and prestige, unaware that the hierarchy she believed governed the evening was already shifting beyond her sight. And when Victoria casually mentioned how easily certain people could be moved aside if they lacked status, a few nearby guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, though nobody challenged her directly. Meanwhile, another black SUV arrived outside, drawing attention from staff stationed near the entrance, and when 3 additional executives entered wearing tailored suits and carrying portfolios, even longtime employees began realizing that whatever event was unfolding upstairs possessed unusual significance, especially when the visitors bypassed the hostess stand entirely and were personally escorted toward the private level by senior management. The manager wiped his forehead again and adjusted his tie, his nervousness growing with each passing minute, because he had begun connecting pieces of information that others had missed, including the identity of the man he had allowed to be displaced earlier in the evening. And although he did not yet understand the full picture, a sense of dread had started forming in the pit of his stomach. Throughout the dining room, glasses clinked softly and piano music floated through the air, preserving the illusion of an ordinary evening, but beneath that elegant surface momentum was building steadily toward a revelation that would challenge assumptions made by guests, staff, and management alike. While Marcus reviewed one final document upstairs before closing the folder and standing from his chair, his reflection briefly visible in the darkening glass, calm, confident, and entirely prepared for what would happen next. As the first stars began appearing above the city, and the distance between appearance and reality narrowed with every passing minute, Marcus finally entered the main dining area after reviewing the final documents upstairs, his presence commanding attention without any effort, and Emily noticed the shift immediately as the staff began moving with more urgency to accommodate the subtle signals of authority he projected. Victoria Langford remained at the corner table, laughing lightly and discussing social events with companions, but the atmosphere around her started to change imperceptibly as whispers circulated among nearby patrons about the man who had quietly assumed control, the black executive whose calm, steady demeanor contrasted sharply with the performative confidence of the socialite. And as Marcus walked past the marble columns, the soft clink of fine china seemed to fall away under the weight of anticipation, every eye drawn to the man who had previously been displaced and yet now exuded power and control. While Victoria continued speaking, unaware of the subtle yet noticeable tension forming in the room, and Emily, balancing her tray, kept her focus on maintaining the flow of service while mentally noting the reactions of guests and staff alike, her movements precise, her observations acute, because she knew something monumental was unfolding. Across the room, the subtle cues of influence became apparent as several managers adjusted seating arrangements and quietly informed the hostess to anticipate changes in the priority of service, reflecting the unspoken acknowledgement that authority had shifted from social pretense to real control, and Marcus, aware of the subtle currents around him, allowed a measured smile to cross his face as he interacted with staff and guests, confirming in small ways the legitimacy of his presence and decisions, demonstrating the quiet power of competence over entitlement. Victoria finally stood to toast to connections and opportunities, her tone confident and practiced, yet Marcus's calm acknowledgement of her gesture, a polite nod, carried more weight than the loud clatter of attention she typically commanded, and Emily, moving efficiently between tables, noted how quickly the social hierarchy in the room began subtly realigning, the black executive's influence spreading silently, unannounced, but evident in the small adjustments of posture and attention from those accustomed to traditional displays of power. In the background, city lights shimmered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting patterns on the polished wooden floors, reflecting the grandeur of the space while simultaneously highlighting the stark contrast between appearance and reality, between the assumptions held by Victoria and the actual power Marcus held, and as conversations continued, the former authority figure found her charm less persuasive, her confidence tested by the quiet, undeniable presence of the man she had underestimated, and Emily, observing from the periphery, felt the tension shift, realizing the evening was now defined not by social posturing but by substantive competence, integrity, and the subtle demonstration of real control. While Marcus approached the head of the room to engage with staff, signaling without fanfare the commencement of a new dynamic in which the black executive, previously overlooked, now commanded the respect and attention previously assumed by entitlement alone, reshaping the room's energy, shifting the expectations of those present, and quietly establishing a hierarchy founded on actual influence and achievement rather than inherited privilege or social theatrics. The morning sunlight filtered through the sleek glass panels of the office, casting a pattern of golden lines across the polished floors as Marcus sat confidently behind his newly acquired desk, reviewing financial reports and making swift, decisive notes that reflected his command over the company he now controlled, while Emily, attentive and precise, moved gracefully around the space, carrying documents and offering updates with subtle cues that kept him informed of all ongoing matters. In the conference room, Victoria Langford arrived with an air of entitlement, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, a confident smile on her face, unaware that the man she had previously dismissed as just another executive now held the authority she had assumed to possess, and as she approached the central table to reclaim what she believed was her place, Marcus acknowledged her presence with a polite nod, the quiet weight of his posture communicating more than any words could, and Emily, standing nearby with her tray of papers, observed the shift in the room, noting how staff and junior executives instinctively repositioned themselves to reflect the new hierarchy without a single directive. Victoria, attempting to maintain composure, initiated a discussion about past agreements and social connections, her tone carefully modulated to assert influence, yet Marcus responded with measured insights and questions that subtly exposed her lack of real control, illustrating the difference between perceived social power and tangible business authority. And as he explained adjustments to ongoing projects and strategic plans, the subtle recalibration of attention in the room revealed that the black executive's reputation for competence and thoughtful leadership now commanded respect, gradually altering Victoria's assumptions about dominance and control in this environment. The ambient sounds of typing, quiet conversations, and the occasional ringing phone accentuated the sense of a professional arena where real decisions were being made. And every gesture Marcus made, from reviewing graphs to directing resources, reinforced the undeniable reality that he was the rightful authority, while Victoria's carefully practiced charm met measured responses and controlled acknowledgement rather than blind acquiescence, highlighting the shift from social theatrics to authentic command. Emily, mindful of both participants, moved strategically, ensuring smooth operations and relaying information with a calm efficiency that underscored Marcus's effective leadership style, while Victoria, recognizing subtle cues of her diminishing influence, began to reassess her approach, her posture and expressions reflecting growing awareness of the transition from assumed dominance to genuine respect grounded in expertise and achievement. The sunlight shifted as the morning progressed, illuminating the contrast between the former sense of entitlement and the present reality of strategic competence, with Marcus demonstrating poise and capability, Victoria adjusting her understanding of authority, and Emily orchestrating the flow of activity. confirming that the office dynamics were now aligned around skill, insight, and measured leadership rather than inherited social status or superficial confidence. And the scene concluded with an unspoken acknowledgement that the balance of power had shifted permanently, setting the stage for the unfolding narrative of recognition, adaptation, and realigned relationships in the corporate environment. The afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, highlighting the gleaming surfaces of Marcus's executive suite, as he and Emily methodically reviewed upcoming proposals and financial forecasts, each spreadsheet and document reflecting the breadth of his newly consolidated authority. Across the room, Victoria Langford lingered near the conference table, attempting to maintain her composure as she scrutinized the details Marcus presented, her posture subtly revealing a mix of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement that the control she had assumed was no longer hers to exercise, and Emily, moving with precise efficiency, passed notes, highlighted figures, and facilitated communication in a way that reinforced Marcus's command. Without ever speaking out of turn, demonstrating a clear hierarchy that Victoria could not contest, the subtle hum of office equipment, the quiet clicks of keyboards, and the soft shuffle of paper set a rhythm of diligence and competence that contrasted sharply with Victoria's previously overconfident demeanor, and Marcus, seated with measured poise, explained strategic adjustments to investment allocations, client outreach, and operational priorities, his voice calm yet authoritative, compelling everyone present to focus on results rather than social standing, and the Black executive's presence radiated a certainty and clarity that naturally drew respect from the staff and even Victoria herself, whose initial assertiveness softened as she absorbed the reality of the situation. Emily, observing both participants, anticipated questions, preempted concerns, and provided supplementary information, her role pivotal in maintaining the flow of the discussion and ensuring that Marcus's decisions were clearly understood, while Victoria's glances shifted between him and the documents, her expressions alternating between careful scrutiny and grudging realization that her previous assumptions about influence and entitlement were being quietly but firmly overturned. The meeting progressed, each agenda item reinforcing the shift in authority, with Marcus addressing challenges, proposing innovative approaches, and inviting feedback in a structured manner that emphasized competence over hierarchy. And as Victoria attempted to interject, Marcus responded with concise, well-reasoned explanations that subtly highlighted her misjudgments, further establishing his dominance in a professional yet tactful manner. By the end of the session, the sunlight had moved across the office, illuminating the contrast between those who relied on social leverage and those whose expertise commanded genuine authority. With Marcus's leadership style exemplifying calm decisiveness, Emily's support demonstrating strategic facilitation, and Victoria's posture and expressions evolving to reflect a growing recognition that true control was grounded in skill, preparation, and clear communication, permanently redefining relationships and expectations within the corporate environment, as the stage was set for the continued assertion of Marcus's rightful position and the recalibration of those who had previously underestimated him. As evening settled over the city, the office floors gradually emptied, but the energy inside the executive suite remained focused and purposeful as Marcus Reed reviewed the final agenda for the upcoming ownership transition event scheduled later that night, the soft glow of recessed lighting reflecting across polished wood surfaces and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked thousands of lights stretching across the skyline. Emily moved efficiently between departments, ensuring every detail was coordinated, every guest list verified, and every presentation prepared, while employees throughout the building whispered quietly about the mysterious changes taking place behind closed doors, rumors spreading faster with each passing hour, yet very few people possessed enough information to understand what was truly happening. Victoria Langford remained inside the building longer than expected, partly because curiosity had begun replacing confidence, and as she walked through the executive corridor she noticed unfamiliar faces arriving, senior attorneys, financial consultants, and board representatives carrying portfolios and confidential documents, all moving with a sense of purpose that seemed unusually focused on a single destination. Meanwhile, Marcus remained calm, reviewing reports with the same composed expression he had displayed throughout the day, never rushing, never appearing concerned, as though every development unfolding around him had already been anticipated weeks in advance, and Emily could not help noticing how naturally people deferred to him, executives seeking his approval before finalizing decisions, department heads adjusting plans after brief conversations, and even longtime managers responding immediately to his recommendations without hesitation. The contrast between perception and reality continued growing sharper, because Victoria still remembered the man who had quietly surrendered a restaurant table without argument. Yet the individual standing before the leadership team now appeared entirely different, not because he had changed, but because the truth was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. Outside the conference room, employees gathered in small groups discussing the evening event, some believing a celebrity investor was arriving, others convinced a major corporation had purchased the company, while nobody seemed willing to say the one possibility that would soon become reality. And as anticipation spread through the building, subtle preparations accelerated, floral arrangements adjusted, audiovisual equipment tested, and reception staff instructed to prepare for an announcement that would affect everyone employed by the organization. Victoria watched these developments from a distance, increasingly aware that important conversations were happening without her involvement, and for perhaps the first time in years she experienced something unfamiliar, uncertainty, because influence had always opened doors for her, yet tonight those doors remained closed. Meanwhile, Marcus stepped away from his desk and approached the window, observing the city below as the final traces of daylight disappeared beyond the horizon, the reflection staring back at him calm and thoughtful, aware that ownership brought responsibility far greater than prestige. And when Emily entered carrying a final folder containing transition documents, Marcus accepted it with a quiet nod before asking whether everything was ready, and her confident answer confirmed that every detail had been handled. Throughout the building, tension and curiosity continued building beneath the polished surface of professionalism, because something significant was approaching, something capable of changing careers, expectations, and assumptions all at once. While Marcus remained remarkably composed at the center of it all, a man who no longer needed to prove his worth to anyone, preparing to walk into a room where appearances would finally give way to reality, and where those who had judged him too quickly would soon discover how completely they had misunderstood the person standing before them. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the high-rise office, illuminating the quiet hum of computers and soft footsteps in the hallways as Marcus, Reed, and Emily prepared for the first major announcement of the day, the energy in the room palpable with anticipation. Marcus, wearing a tailored navy suit and a calm, focused expression, checked over final reports and financial statements, while Emily, organized and meticulous, reviewed the guest list and ensured that each department had coordinated effectively for the upcoming conference call, the rhythm of their teamwork seamless and practiced after years of collaboration. Outside, the lobby bustled with employees discussing potential mergers and acquisitions, rumors of a significant change circulating quietly through whispers and speculative glances, yet none could predict the exact scale of the revelation about to unfold, a revelation that would upend expectations and force even seasoned executives to reevaluate their assumptions about power and influence within the company. As Marcus moved through the office, he greeted colleagues with polite nods and concise words, projecting authority without arrogance, his presence commanding attention and respect, while Emily handled last-minute adjustments, coordinating with assistants and technical staff to ensure that every presentation, every visual aid, and every report was ready for scrutiny by the board and external partners. Meanwhile, in a nearby office, Victoria Langford adjusted her appearance and notes, preparing to enter the room where the executives would gather, unaware that the sequence of events was already shifting in ways she had not anticipated, the balance of control gradually tilting toward Marcus as the truth of his ownership quietly solidified behind layers of formal procedure and legal verification. The conference room filled steadily, and employees, board members, and financial advisors took their seats, murmuring softly about potential outcomes, the air thick with expectation as monitors displayed graphs, charts, and projections, all meticulously prepared by Marcus's team, his calm demeanor serving as a counterpoint to the nervous energy in the room, signaling that the situation was under control even as every observer sensed that an extraordinary announcement was imminent. Emily adjusted the final microphone and glanced at Marcus for confirmation, receiving a subtle nod that conveyed trust, readiness, and the silent acknowledgement that today's events would leave a lasting impression on everyone present. And as the clock ticked closer to the scheduled time, both Marcus and Emily stood side by side, poised and confident, their movements precise, their awareness of every detail absolute, knowing that the moment they were about to enter would challenge perceptions, disrupt assumptions, and reveal the unexpected truth that would leave the entire organization in stunned awe. Throughout the office, subtle cues of preparation continued, from the meticulous arrangement of seating to the discreet positioning of cameras and recording devices, each element contributing to the unfolding drama that blended professional poise with underlying tension, all under the watchful eyes of Marcus and Emily, who understood that the culmination of their planning and efforts was about to create a moment that no one in the room would soon forget, a moment that would test patience, judgment, and the ability to respond to sudden and profound shifts in corporate reality. And as the final seconds passed, the room fell into near silence, all eyes turning toward Marcus and Emily, the pair ready to step forward and reveal the information that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of everyone involved, demonstrating once again that careful planning, composure, and strategic foresight could turn an ordinary morning into an unforgettable, history-making moment. In the corporate world, as the boardroom settled into a tense silence, the final slide flickered onto the large screen, capturing everyone's attention with a precise graphic of ownership structure and a subtle highlight that pointed directly to Marcus Reed's name, the revelation hanging in the air like an electric current. Emily, composed and meticulous, adjusted the microphone slightly, her eyes meeting Marcus's with a shared understanding that the moment had arrived to deliver the truth that would shatter assumptions and redefine authority within the company, her calm demeanor reinforcing the gravity of the situation and the careful orchestration behind it. Whispers began to ripple through the room as colleagues glanced at each other, trying to reconcile the familiar executive's commanding presence with the unexpected disclosure that he was now the rightful owner of the bank, a twist that no one had anticipated despite the subtle hints woven into recent reports and financial statements. And as murmurs grew, the executive assistants and board members subtly shifted in their seats, aware that history was unfolding before their eyes and that the careful strategy executed by Marcus and Emily had transformed a routine corporate gathering into a defining moment. Outside the glass walls, employees passed by the lobby screens, catching glimpses of the announcement, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration as the reality sank in that the leader they had long respected for his strategic insight was also the one holding ultimate ownership, and the ripple effect began almost immediately, with phone calls, texts, and emails being discreetly exchanged among stakeholders, investors, and department heads, each trying to assess the implications for their own projects, budgets, and strategic plans while maintaining professional composure. As Marcus spoke, his voice steady and deliberate, he outlined the legal framework, the procedural steps taken to secure ownership, and the vision for the future, emphasizing collaboration, transparency, and growth, his words resonating with authority and confidence, each sentence reinforcing the legitimacy of his position and the careful planning that had brought them to this unprecedented juncture. Emily complimented Marcus by guiding the presentation visuals, highlighting strategic opportunities and operational plans with clarity, her poised explanations ensuring that every attendee understood both the immediate consequences and long-term vision. And as she concluded a particularly critical point, the room responded with quiet nods, a mix of astonishment and respect apparent on every face, realizing that their preconceptions had been skillfully challenged and that the dynamic between authority, trust, and leadership had shifted irrevocably. Throughout the session, Marcus and Emily maintained a subtle synergy, their coordination seamless, demonstrating not only mastery of corporate strategy but also an ability to manage perception, influence outcomes, and command attention without ostentation, each glance and gesture reinforcing the trust and alignment that underpinned their leadership. And as the final minutes of the presentation unfolded, the room absorbed the full impact of the revelation, the initial shock giving way to acceptance and contemplation, colleagues reflecting on the meticulous planning, ethical considerations, and strategic acumen required to orchestrate such a dramatic shift, while Marcus and Emily quietly observed the reactions, confident that the legacy of this moment would endure, shaping the culture, expectations, and future trajectory of the company in profound and lasting ways. The silence that followed the presentation felt heavier than any speech that had come before it, and for several long seconds nobody seemed quite sure how to respond as the reality settled across the room like a slow-moving tide. Victoria Langford sat perfectly still near the center of the conference table, her fingers resting against a leather folder she had not opened in several minutes, her confidence replaced by a growing awareness that every assumption she had made since that evening at the restaurant had been wrong. while around her executives exchanged measured glances and board members quietly reviewed the documents confirming what Marcus Reed had just revealed, the soft rustle of paper becoming the only sound in the room. Marcus remained composed at the front of the conference space, not enjoying anyone's discomfort and not seeking vindication, simply standing with the calm confidence of a man who no longer needed validation from people who had underestimated him. And Emily watched from the side of the room, noticing how quickly the atmosphere had changed from skepticism to respect, because the truth had a way of rearranging every conversation without raising its voice. One board member finally cleared his throat and congratulated Marcus on the acquisition, prompting several others to follow, and within moments the room shifted from stunned silence to professional acknowledgement. Yet even then Marcus accepted every compliment with the same humility he had shown when he quietly walked away from the table that should have been his weeks earlier, never mentioning the incident and never drawing attention to the irony of the situation. Victoria noticed that too, and it unsettled her more than anger would have, because she had expected some reminder, some subtle criticism, some indication that Marcus intended to settle old scores, but none came, and the absence of revenge forced her to confront something far more uncomfortable than embarrassment, the realization that character could be stronger than status. As the meeting continued, Marcus outlined his plans for the future of the company, speaking about employee development, customer trust, operational excellence and long-term growth, his focus entirely directed toward building something meaningful rather than celebrating his personal success. And with every objective he explained, employees around the room became more engaged, their attention shifting from the surprise of ownership to the possibilities of leadership. Emily advanced the presentation slides smoothly, highlighting new initiatives designed to create opportunity across every level of the organization, and several managers began taking notes, recognizing that Marcus was not merely changing who occupied the top office but also changing the culture itself. Victoria listened carefully, her earlier certainty dissolving with each passing minute because the man she had dismissed based on appearance and assumption was demonstrating a level of preparation, discipline, and vision that few leaders ever achieved. And for the first time she began seeing him clearly rather than through the lens of her own expectations. Outside the conference room, evening lights reflected across the city skyline, turning the glass walls into mirrors that captured the expressions of everyone present. And those reflections revealed something important, not simply the transfer of ownership, but the transfer of respect, earned not through privilege but through patience, competence, and integrity. By the time the meeting finally approached its conclusion, the mood had transformed completely, and as executives gathered their materials and prepared to leave, there was a growing sense that they had witnessed more than a corporate announcement. They had witnessed the quiet triumph of someone who had refused to let arrogance define his response. And while Victoria remained seated for a moment longer, watching Marcus speak with employees who genuinely admired him, she realized that the lesson unfolding before her had nothing to do with wealth, titles, or influence, and everything to do with the kind of person someone chooses to become when they finally have the power to do anything they want. The following week brought a different atmosphere to the company, one that could be felt in the hallways, conference rooms, and even in the quiet moments between meetings, as employees adjusted to the reality of Marcus Reed's leadership and gradually began recognizing the difference between authority that demanded attention and leadership that earned it. The executive offices remained busy from sunrise until evening, but there was a noticeable sense of purpose throughout the organization. Feeling that decisions were being made with clarity and direction rather than ego, and Emily noticed the change every day as she moved between departments, listening to conversations that increasingly focused on opportunity, innovation, and teamwork rather than office politics or status. Marcus spent much of his time meeting with employees at every level of the company, speaking with managers, analysts, receptionists, and support staff, making a deliberate effort to understand their experiences and perspectives, and those conversations quickly became one of the defining characteristics of his leadership style, because he understood something many executives forgot, that people performed their best work when they felt respected and valued. One afternoon, while reviewing progress reports in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city, Marcus introduced a series of new initiatives designed to improve professional development, mentorship opportunities, and internal advancement, and the response was immediate. Employees who had previously felt invisible now saw pathways toward growth, while department leaders found themselves energized by a vision that extended beyond quarterly results and financial targets. Emily coordinated implementation efforts with her usual precision, organizing meetings, distributing materials, and ensuring that every team understood both the purpose and practical impact of the changes. And as she watched the organization begin responding positively, she felt a growing sense of pride in what they were building together. Meanwhile, Victoria Langford found herself reflecting more often than she expected, because the image she had formed of Marcus weeks earlier no longer matched reality, and the more she observed his actions, the more difficult it became to justify the assumptions she had made, particularly when she saw how consistently he treated people with dignity regardless of their title, background, or position within the company. During one leadership gathering, Marcus publicly recognized the contributions of several junior employees whose work had previously gone unnoticed, and the genuine surprise on their faces reminded everyone in the room that recognition carried power when it was sincere. While Victoria sat quietly among the attendees, watching a man she had once dismissed use influence not to elevate himself but to elevate others. Outside the conference room, sunlight reflected across the city skyline, filling the building with warm afternoon light that softened the sharp lines of glass and steel, and in that moment the organization seemed transformed, not because ownership had changed, but because culture had begun changing with it. Employees smiled more often, conversations felt more collaborative, and managers spent more time listening than directing, creating an environment that reflected Marcus's belief that respect was not a privilege reserved for a select few but a standard that should define every interaction. As the meeting concluded and people gathered their notes, several employees approached Marcus to thank him personally for the opportunities he had created, and he accepted their appreciation with the same humility that had characterized every stage of his journey, never speaking about obstacles he had overcome and never seeking sympathy for challenges others could not see, choosing instead to focus on the future. From across the room, Victoria watched those interactions unfold and realized that the most remarkable part of Marcus's success was not the ownership, the wealth, or the authority, but the fact that after gaining every reason to place himself above others, he continued choosing to lift people up instead, and that realization stayed with her long after the meeting ended, becoming impossible to ignore as the company entered a new chapter defined not by power alone, but by character. By the time the weekend arrived, the atmosphere within the office had shifted completely, a transformation that was tangible in the expressions, conversations, and even the posture of employees as they moved through the hallways, each interaction reflecting a new respect and sense of possibility. Emily Thompson watched the teams gather in the main conference room, a space usually reserved for high-level meetings, and she observed the energy, noticing how people who had once hesitated to speak now shared ideas openly, supported by Marcus Reed's consistent encouragement and leadership style that emphasized collaboration, integrity, and accountability. Marcus spent the morning walking through departments, stopping to ask questions, listen attentively, and provide guidance without any hint of condescension, demonstrating a form of leadership that was rare in corporate environments, a style that inspired trust rather than fear and reminded everyone that influence was most powerful when used to uplift others rather than assert dominance. As the day progressed, Emily coordinated a series of workshops designed to train managers on equitable practices, ensuring that all employees, regardless of role or background, had access to mentorship, resources, and professional development, while Marcus personally joined several sessions, sharing his experiences, offering advice, and reinforcing the importance of fairness and inclusion in every decision, and each interaction seemed to ripple throughout the organization, affecting morale and engagement in ways that metrics alone could not measure. Meanwhile, Victoria Langford found herself in an internal meeting, reflecting on the stark contrast between her initial assumptions and the reality she now witnessed, as she listened to Marcus commend a junior employee. Publicly, acknowledging their contributions and dedication, she realized that respect and recognition were no longer privileges reserved for certain individuals but standards that defined the workplace culture under Marcus's direction. And the realization prompted a subtle shift in her own perspective on leadership and accountability. Throughout the day, Emily and Marcus engaged with cross-functional teams, reviewing project updates, celebrating successes, and addressing challenges. Collaboratively, fostering a sense of shared purpose and commitment to organizational growth that was evident in the energized discussions, the laughter shared in break areas, and the willingness of employees to offer creative solutions, reflecting a culture that had evolved rapidly due to intentional leadership choices and consistent, fair treatment of all personnel. As afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm patterns across polished desks and gleaming floors. Marcus paused to observe the office environment, noting the smiles, the conversations, and the evident motivation among teams, and he felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that ownership of the company was not defined merely by title or position but by the values instilled throughout every department. At the end of the day, Emily and Marcus met briefly to review progress and upcoming initiatives, sharing insights and planning next steps to ensure momentum continued. And as employees began to leave, the sense of unity and mutual respect lingered, a testament to the intentional transformation of company culture, demonstrating that true leadership and influence were measured not by authority alone but by the positive impact on the people entrusted to that leadership, a lesson not lost on Victoria, who observed quietly, recognizing that Marcus's approach would leave a lasting mark on both the company and her own understanding of integrity and collaboration.